Okay, so I'm really excited to have you here today, so we can go over some questions and maybe learn a little bit more about what you do. So before we start, do you want to kind of give a little introduction?
Sure, I'm really excited to be here as well. My name is Sierra McClain-Henry. I am the owner of Sankofa Mama Birth Services. I'm a birth support company based in Houston, Texas, but serving mamas wherever we exist in the world. I offer that birth support through doula services, both birth and postpartum doula work, as well as birth education. I am also a peer lactation counselor and an all around breastfeeding advocate. In a short version, though, if I met you somewhere and you asked me what I do, I'd say I stand up for Black mamas. That's what I do.
I love that. Okay, so sort of moving into our questions. The first one I had is, what is your philosophy around Black motherhood and health for both the child and the mother? Sort of like, what's your personal ideal for what you do?
I think that's sort of a two-parter for me, just because we're currently in such dramatically different times, even from what they were at the start of 2020. I would say that in general, my business is called Sankofa. Mama Sankofa is a term that means to reach back and get it. In the Akan language, and it means to go back to things from the past that could help us work towards a brighter future in terms of birth work. That kind of sums up my philosophy, because I feel like we have gotten into almost the over medicalization of birth. And we've just completely changed as a whole the way we view birth, and even the way that we understand it as being a natural, normal function of life. And so I believe that there was once a point in time when we came at birth and even at our bodies from places of power, because we understood just the natural, normal nature of these functions for pregnancy and birth. And then we got into a really weird and scary place where our bodies were demonized, right? And those who, like midwives, who would tend to us and our bodies, were also demonized, even criminalized and prosecuted. And so I think that we could serve ourselves well by returning to that older look at birth, and even the fact that birth is no longer honored as much as it used to be, whereas it's now like this pain centric event that you try to avoid that part of as much as you can. So my philosophy before 2020, before the pandemic, if you ask me, would be to look back on some of the ways of our ancestors, and the ways that we not only honored our births, but the way that we actually literally got through our births. When we're looking at things like the herbs and, our traditional ancient medicine that we used. Now, on this side of the pandemic, I would say my philosophy toward Black motherhood, Black birth, pregnancy is we must be aware, we must be vigilant. There's no such thing as hyper vigilant when it comes to this. We are currently in a Black maternal health crisis. And with the current social climate in our country, everything that even has something remotely to do with issues of race is just amplified. And we're seeing that for the good and for the bad. The things that are bad are just really showing all of their ugliness. So, my philosophy right now is advocate for yourself, educate yourself, be aware, be prepared.
Thank you for that. I feel like it's good to make note of when your philosophy changes, especially
Mm-hmm.
in this year. I feel like a lot of people had to have time to reflect on what's going on and how that affects their specific professions. And especially as a Black professional, you have to readjust the ways in which you're assisting your community as the needs have changed, which I feel you've done quite successfully. um, so my next question is, what motivated you to go into this field of birth education and working as a doula in the first place?
Well, I was a doula first. I was interested in all things birth And I was pregnant myself in 2014 and had already been interested in all things birth. I mean, I remember a magazine, you know, those magazines they have near the exit of the grocery store, and it's like, you know, local attractions and things like that, family centered attractions. So I would get those when I was little. That's just how I was as a kid. I'd read through them, look at all the ads, and I can clearly remember ads for a birthing center that's actually still here in Houston to this day, Nativity Birthing Center, shout out. Um, but I remember seeing this ad they had, and it mentioned this water birth. And I was a child, but I just was so drawn to that idea and just, I wasn't even sure what all it involved, but I knew I wanted to have one. And so fast forward, I was pregnant, hired a midwife, and my midwife actually suggested it to me because our appointments would go just way off the rails. I mean, I was going so deep in with the things I wanted to know. And she's like, this isn't normal. You should become a doula. And she introduced me to the concept of what a doula was. I had a doula at my own birth. It wasn't just my love for all things birth that drove me to this work, though. I trained when I was pregnant, had a doula myself at my first birth. And what I thought doula work was when I was training versus what I experienced it being for me during my birth had nothing to do with one another. I thought I would have this wonderful, beautiful, supported experience, and I didn't feel like that's what I had at all. And it kind of left me confused as to, well, what is the actual role of a doula? And it didn't turn me off from the work. It drove me towards it in another way. And I just became like super determined to be what I needed. Cause I'm like, if I was, I can't be the only one who's ever experienced this. Like, didn't really feel supported. I had a doula right there. So it just drove me to practice as a doula in the way that I do now, which is just completely giving all of myself to my clients, because what's most important for me is that women feel supported when they're going into the labor room.
Thank you. So my next question is, what's any advice you have for young Black mothers who are concerned about the process of birth, not only just that, because like you said, there's a big sort of atmosphere of fear, especially around people my age, not only with everything going on, but just kind of a lack of knowledge about the process. What advice would you have for them, especially people who may be studying or maybe in school at the time, and feel like this is like a lot of paths kind of converging at once?
Yeah, in doing that, it's making me realize I didn't fully answer your last question, and it's relevant to answer this. You also asked why I became a birth educator. Birth education was not something that I thought was necessary. I thought that was extra. But I heard of this thing called hypnobirthing, and it just sounded like it was cool. It sounded like something I'd be into. Everything I read and doing my research just resonated with just personal practices that were already a part of my life, like breathing, breath work, you know, affirmations, meditation. And I'm so glad that I did take a class. They always say you don't know what you don't know. My advice to those young moms would be, arm yourself with education. That advocacy, self-advocacy that I talked about earlier is nearly impossible to do if you are not prepared and armed with knowledge. You know, you don't stand a chance against these medical establishments if you walk in, as a doula friend of mine would say, all willy-nilly walking into the hospital. This is not the day and age for that. This is not the time for that. Even if you are planning to birth in the comfort of your own home, you need to educate yourself. Many of us get to old age and have very little understanding of our bodies. We fear our bodies, you know, and it's for so many different reasons. A lot of it is indoctrination, but it leads us to hold some of the same beliefs that I mentioned before, from the time period when women's bodies were like demonized, and if you became pregnant, it was through some, vile sorcery with you and your feminine wiles, and just ridiculous. But meanwhile, on maybe a lesser level, but still, we're not educated about our own bodies. We're afraid to touch our own bodies. I would say find a way to work through that. Get to know yourself and your body. I would say, don't think that you're being extra to add practices into your life, things like meditation. The value of that is teaching you how to lean in and listen to yourself, lean in and listen to your instinct. If you are going into, an upcoming labor, or even if you're, looking ahead to parenting beyond that, and you don't know how to trust yourself and trust your instincts, you're going to have a really tough go at it. Everyone will always have their own opinions, but what should trump everything is the research you've done for yourself. That's the education, in order to form your own stance and your own opinion. I was just watching something that said traditions are great, but traditions don't have to be forever. If there's something that's not working for you, it's totally fine to forge your own path. Especially as a young mom, we're just conditioned to think that we don't know as much as someone who may be older than us. And yes, there is a lot of wisdom that can come with age, but trust yourself. The decisions you make for your body and your baby, no one is more qualified to make those decisions than you are. And no one is more of an authority or expert over your body than you are. The last thing I would say to those young mamas is know your rights, okay? Your body is, this term I love, sacrosanct. That means your body is its own like holy place, right? If you wouldn't let somebody come and poke and prod your vagina when you were not pregnant, just because you are a pregnant or laboring mama doesn't mean that consent is out of the window, and that anyone, whether they have on a lab coat or whatever, has the right to do things to you and your body just because they want to do it. You absolutely not only have the right to consent, but you can withdraw your consent. And you should. You should withdraw your consent anytime you feel the need to do so. And withdrawing your consent is a complete act within itself. Saying, I no longer want this is a complete sentence. Know that and trust that. Don't let anyone talk down on you because you're younger. You're there, and as far as your child can see, you are the sun, the moon, and the stars, and there's nothing beyond you. So walk in that, hold your head up high and own that. And it's okay to also have to put older people in their place, like motherhood for some reason comes along with this, like, this thing of where people are like, I'm just going to give you all the advice. The younger you are, the more advice I'm going to give you. And it's not even really advice, right? Because they expect you to take it and just implement it, no questions asked. And that is for the birds. You walk in your own divine wisdom, trust yourself above all else.
Thank you. I feel like I learned a lot from that. Okay, so my next question is, what's your favorite part of your job, either being a birth educator or being a doula, just any part of what you do? What is like the most fulfilling or favorite part of
it? Lately, it's been teaching. It's really been teaching. I have like tons of educators in my family, and was always one who was like, I will never teach. I never had that urge. Playing school when I was growing up didn't make me want to be a kindergarten teacher, like none of that, and now here I am where teaching is one of my favorite parts, especially now with COVID. And, I do a lot of virtual work, and I am seeing mamas, parents, families every day on my screen, and just seeing these people sit in front of me and they're open, like it's a requirement I have if you take my class. We go through together and I tell them like, hey, the first thing I need you to do is agree to open your mind and open your heart and let go of any, ideas and thoughts you have about birth before this moment. We're going to let all of that go because none of us have been to this birth. So we don't know what's going to happen. And just throughout the class, as I watch like these myths and these fears, right? These false expectations that appear real, when I watch them start to dissipate and I see the connections happening and all of the moments, it's so rewarding and fulfilling, and I absolutely love it. And I feel like, it's the best gift I could ever give you, ever, ever, ever. And I always say, I see so many different birth shirts and different slogans that talk about, the empowerment that we do as doulas and midwives and how birth empowers you. And I think that that's wrong. I don't believe it, because I believe that we are all inherently powerful in our own right. It's just that we go through so much and hear so much our whole life. We're being, conditioned to see birth and our bodies in this certain way that we have to strip all of that away so we can get back down to what it is and realize I'm not empowering you, simply reminding you that you're already powerful. But something as simple as that, reminding someone that they are already powerful and capable in their own right, whether they had met me before or not, it's such a huge moment that is actually very moving. And so I love that. It's, for me, it's not about, taking on clients and making them feel dependent on me. I love watching them as we work together through the weeks, just becoming more and more confident in themselves and just seeing that strength on display. And then if we're talking, on the doula side of things, birth is incredible. If you've never seen it, boy, you've got to get in there. You've got to go and see it for yourself at least one time. There's nothing on earth that gives you more of a high and a rush. And there's just nothing like it. I don't care how tired I am. I've been called away from family functions and things I really, really want to do. And I might even on the way to the birth be thinking like, but I really wanted to go to that thing. But once you walk into that room, the energy is so electric. There's nothing like being in a birthing room, especially at home birth. Oh, it's incredible. But regardless, that moment, a lot of times I get to be the very first person who sees the baby. Like, it's really cool. I'm there. I'm at that vantage point. And so that moment when I see this new life come earthside, it just makes my stomach jump every time, and I cry at every single birth, and holding the baby and looking down. And when I look at babies, I just think like, we don't know who this person is going to be in the world. Like, what if I'm holding a future, leader of the free world, like, or someone who is just going to, with their amazing radical thoughts, they're going to just change life as we know it. So it's all my favorite part, basically.
I love that. You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier with your first experience with the doula at your own birth, but how do you feel like, I know you had multiple births, how do you feel like your experience in your personal life has influenced the way that you go about your profession, specifically with empowerment and such? Like, did you feel the need for your personal touch within your community even more after your own experiences?
Absolutely. And, I kind of am in a bubble when it comes to things like social media, where like I would say easily 80%, if not more, of the people that I follow and that follow me are birth workers, right? So given that, my feed looks like birth, 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 birth. So I see it all, from the beautiful pictures and moments to every time another Black mom dies and is a casualty of the Black maternal health crisis. and the way that it rears its head in so many different ways, I see that. Whereas, somebody who's not in this work, they may not even be aware of how often it happens, how it happens all the time. But when it happens for me, it's almost like when they say, when you experience a death in the family and you feel like your world has stopped, but then it's such a one of those moments where you feel small in the universe when you look around and realize that everybody else's world didn't stop. Like, this person who meant so much to me and impacted me in such a way is gone. And I feel like I can hardly go on, but the world has continued. And I experience just a small portion of that every time another Black mom dies, and I read the story and I hear about how, well, the C-section was questionable. Well, she was in the hospital for 2 days suffering with issues that were partially showing themselves as high blood pressure issues, but somehow she didn't receive any medication for 2 days, the whole 2 days she was in there, or just any number of these circumstances. And that's just two of the most recent, just in the past few weeks, and so it puts a pause on me, because I can't stop being a Black mama myself, and I can't separate myself from that. And you can't see that if it keeps being people who look like you, if it keeps being, let's look at it even on a broader scale, if it keeps being Black people who are coming up unarmed and dead, or in situations where deadly force was not called for, but it keeps being people that look like you can't help but be affected by that. It informs everything you do. It informs the way you leave your house, right? It informs, it dictates the state of your mental health on any given day. And it's like that for me, because when I was pregnant the second time around, I was a lot deeper into this birth world. And so things like that were a lot more of my reality. And I remember a mama who, I came upon her story, and I still am to this day, almost 2.5 years later, still following her partner. And I came across him in this part in his journey where they were pregnant, and just a few weeks ahead of me. And they went into the hospital, and like so many of these stories, somehow only him and the baby came out. And they had all these plans and all these hopes and dreams and, all of these good times ahead of them that they were looking towards. But she never left the hospital. She was completely healthy. There were no risk factors in her pregnancy. But the racism in this factor with the Black maternal health crisis, it's institutionalized, so much so that it's so ingrained in the mechanism of the medical complex that you don't even recognize it as such until you have to sit with it and take it apart, and you recognize different things that happen. And I was so affected by this mama's story. I can't recall her full name. I know her first name was Mish. That I, even as a birth worker and all the things that I know and a birth educator, I was so afraid. And I even told my husband in the weeks before I was due that I was having these really dark thoughts, and I was consumed by them at times, to the point of just sitting and crying and unable to even carry on with my functions for the day. Because if you've ever been that afraid of death, then you'll know what I mean. And that's what it was. And I had to start thinking ahead to what life would be like for my older daughter, who was 3 at the time. And just small things I would do around the house, I'm folding her laundry and putting it away. And I felt the need to write a little note and tape it on the wall, telling my husband, like, what stuff goes on which shelf, because it was a very real possibility that I may not be here anymore, that they may be bringing this baby home and I may not be here anymore. So my own experiences definitely inform the care that I give. I take this work very seriously. The information I deliver to a mama, I'm going to find a way to get that information to you, because it could be as simple as just informing you of alternatives, just informing you that you have the right to this and that. simply doing that could make the difference. And I don't know if, matter of fact, I'm not going to say I don't know. I do know that a lot of my non-Black counterparts in this work, especially if they don't work with Black mamas, and even if they do, they don't have to feel what I feel, because they're not coupling the understanding of the urgency of delivering this information with their own mortality. And knowing if I fall pregnant again, I hope that somebody does this for me, because it could literally mean the difference between my life and my death. My experience, I'll say I felt failed at my own first birth. You know, I did. I knew that there had to be more. We know from research and evidence that doula support can make a difference in maternal outcomes. It can make a difference in, even if it's not all the way to the difference between life and death, it can make the difference between interventions in your birth that were not something that you desired for yourself or not. It could make the difference between whether or not you have a cesarean, you know. So I infuse myself in it. I care deeply. I'm an empath already. And so, you know, I can't separate that from this work that I do. And there's a spiritual side to the work that I do as well. And so I come at this with my whole self, and everything I am motivates the way that I practice as a doula.
Thank you. I feel like I can definitely relate, not in the same field, but in the field that I want to go into, because I want to work in clinical therapy. And there's definitely a thing where I've had my peers or my friends who've gone to therapy come back and just be totally adverse to the very concept because they have a very negative experience. And it's sort of the same thing where it just motivates me to get to that position even faster, because I feel like if I can provide the support that I know I would need and I would care for, it would help kind of similarity in the mental health crisis that's going on, and how a lot of people refuse care because they're scared of being rejected or just being given medication.
Absolutely.
And in a lot of ways, it's important that people who feel that like push to be involved and to help do so, because otherwise, you know, who's educating people and who's helping the people?
It's kind of my main motivation for going into the profession that I want to go in, because I feel like I've seen a lot of initiatives about mental health care, but I still want to be a part of that change, at least within my generation. And I may still be studying to get there, but that's like one of my main pushes for it, is I feel like everybody should be allowed to get the care that they need without fear of not only judgment, but fear of not being understood by wherever they decide to go to seek help. Absolutely. And that is a part of it for me as well. Anytime that you have, it's called cultural competency, then it's just going to enhance the quality of the service, therapy, care that you're offering. You know, with therapists, for example, there's going to be a barrier to you as the patient receiving all of the full benefit of that therapy, if in order for me to get to the root of why I actually even scheduled the session, I have to first give context or explain my Black experience, because there's no way around the fact that the Black experience in America from the time that our ancestors arrived on this shore, it is a unique experience. And so that is a problem, to feel that you can't fully relate, can't fully open up. It's a very big issue also in the birthing world. Cultural competency is needed all around. I definitely feel like I said it enhances the quality of support and care. There is something disarming about not having to first explain yourself just for you being yourself. And so that's huge for me, to be a Black woman in a field that has not been dominated by Black women, to say the least, can make the difference in whether or not someone even accepts services like mine, even though we know they can make the difference in these maternal health outcomes. What good is that if there is still a gap and we're not truly connecting these wonderful services with the people who actually need them? So we have to find ourselves being these connectors when we are Black women in this space. We're connecting, and it's a vital connection, because without that, then they may have never gotten. I've actually had some people tell me that they didn't feel like certain support services were for them. You know, if I go to a brochure wall at a birthing center, and there's all these brochures about all these wonderful things, but nothing at all, I see myself in nothing at all, you know. And it happens for other groups as well, not just Black people, but I am a Black mama advocate. So, you know, I'm just highlighting it in that way, that representation matters, cultural competency matters, and your level of comfort matters as well.
I definitely agree, especially because things like birth and mental health are so personal, and they require such like an understanding of yourself almost, to be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable with the process that is bound to come. And it's more difficult when you feel like you're not even in a place where you belong, which I
Absolutely.
feel is a big issue for a lot of people when it comes to seeking out care. Because I know a lot of my peers, a lot of my Black female peers are like, I don't know if I ever want to have kids. I'm just scared of, like, it's just a blanket fear around this concept because people barely want to go to the doctor for anything. And they feel like their only option is to go to the doctor if they're pregnant or having any sort of complication. And when you hear, like you said, these stories, you're always scared that you're going to be the next person to just not come out.
Yeah.
So it's definitely this sort of blanket of fear that acts as a barrier to people getting care that they need, especially when they really need it.
And I don't want to leave us with that fear. This is part of me being an empath, guys. I have to, I would like to seal that out, and steer us toward the positive, because what do we do with that fear? Um, Education is the first thing, because when we spotlight and identify something and educate ourselves on that, it illuminates it, right? Illumination removes the things about it that are dark. Maybe, you know, you remember children being afraid when you turn the light off in their room, and when you turn the light on, them realizing, oh, that's only, you know, the shelf over there. That's only your toy. So when you illuminate these things through education, then it takes away some of the influence and power that those things can tend to hold over you. And when you also realize that there's a lot of negative in the world, and if you are moving towards birth and wanting to do birth in this radical new way, I say new because it's really that Sankofa, that coming back to what once was, then you have to do something different that starts here in your mind. Um, the way you look at birth, the way you view it, the way you think about it, the way you feel about it is going to shape the way you birth. And if you want to do a new thing, you got to do a new thing. So, you know, I would say that you should definitely tap in and tune in to the online community. And I'll say, you'll be happy to know this. Black Maternal Mental Health Week exists. We just celebrated the second annual Black Maternal Mental Health Week. I actually spoke at the virtual summit, but I say that to say there's a whole community out there. The internet has become this great equalizer, right? Like, you don't have to have a car or anything. You just can log in and you can immediately connect, because community is so important. It takes a village to raise a child. We've all heard that. It really takes a village to raise a mama. And when we raise her up, to keep her up. So it's why we say in doula work that our job is also holding space. I stand at the gap between where you are and where you're going into motherhood, and I'm holding space for you there. And I'm making sure that you feel held and supported as you make that transition into motherhood. But I'm not just going to drop you once you're there. I'm going to continue holding you up. And we have a responsibility to one another to do that.
Sort of in that same vein, we've discussed kind of how systemic racism is within the healthcare system, and your own experiences as a patient. For students who may be pursuing a career within the healthcare field or within medicine, what advice would you give to the next generation of these like healthcare providers?
I would say check your biases. Definitely check your bias. We all have bias on some level. But if you are really doing the work on yourself, then you'll be able to get those biases in check. And you have to. You have to. There's just no way around it. There was a study done recently, like within the past 10 years, which is very recent, where they surveyed non-Black residents, and I want to say it was residents. I mean, they may have been physicians, but they surveyed them on their opinions on Black women in our bodies, and still there's still this belief of things like Black women don't feel pain like non-Black women do. You know, our skin is like literally thicker or something, and something like that's going to affect you. Go in to draw blood from a Black woman, maybe you don't even realize you're not being as gentle as you should be, you know, and that's on a small scale. This can, again, be life and death, you know. I had a C-section, partially because I was told by my caregiver that Black women's pelvises just don't open. It's just very common. It'll be okay. You're just going to need to accept a C-section. And being in the vulnerable place where I was, and not being in this place of power and knowledge that I am now, that sunk in. It sunk in. It affected me. And, you know, I ended up with a C-section and all of the trauma and the feelings that an unplanned cesarean brings on that I still deal with to this day. So I would say check your biases. I would say you have no business going into medicine and treating Black bodies if you don't feel like those Black bodies have worth and value, and that the souls that inhabit those bodies are impactful and meaningful here on this earth, because they were placed here just like you. You have no business approaching a Black body if you feel otherwise. I would always say, also say to Black medical students, I would say, I feel like you should not go into your profession if you haven't read a book called Medical Apartheid, which was so amazingly profound to me. It's not surprising, should be, but it's not. It's all about the dark history of medical experimentation and research on Black people here in America. And it's eye-opening. It's not surprising, unfortunately, but I feel once I read it, I was like, wow, anyone who's Black, who's going into medicine, needs to read this and understand that this happened, and that some of these things happened as recently as the 1970s and 80s. So it's something that I feel care providers need to hold in their mind and always be mindful. I believe that there should be good intent in the hearts of those who practice medicine. Otherwise, they have no business being there.
I would definitely agree. Another question, this one is more surrounding our current conditions with the pandemic. How has your work sort of changed since this whole quarantine and pandemic has started? You said that you've done a lot of digital work, but how else has this affected you?
Wow, yeah, when it changed, when everything switched over to being locked down, and it all happened so quickly, I actually had a mama, and I say she was on like the cusp of, you know, business as usual and pandemic mode, because I started working with her before the pandemic, and we were, of course, having, you know, our in-person prenatal meetings, and we had all the plans for me to attend her birth, and then everything shut down. And early on in the shutdown, there was a lot more caution and fear, and understandably so. But so things like that, changed. Here I am, converting from, we just were at lunch having a leisurely meeting a week ago, and now I am I'm here at your house and we can't hug. Just a week before, everything was fine, everything was all good. So it drastically changed the way that I am able to work. For me, touch is huge, just personally. Even I'm affected by touch, and so not being, and I'm a touchy feely doula. All of my mamas, like I'm all over you, like, and so not in a creepy way. But that changed, not being able to do that, not being able to provide comforting touch was a big deal for me. And then what changed, though, was not all negative. I would say that it changed in some of the best ways. My life has been enhanced by the virtual clients I've taken on over this past year. I mean, I would never have imagined that I'd work with mamas in South Africa this time last year. I wouldn't have seen how it would be possible without some sort of huge grant that afforded me the opportunity to go there. But I now am working with mamas all over the country and all over the world, and it's such an amazing experience. This tool, the internet, that it's so good and it's so bad, but it's taken away any barriers to the accessibility side of my services. At the beginning of the pandemic, I launched the 100 Black Mamas Project, and it is a birth education project aimed at bringing birth education to the masses. My goal was initially to educate 100 mamas. I didn't want them to have to pay for it, so I started just like a grassroots social media fundraiser, asking folks to pitch in and to sponsor a mama. And if a mama did have to cover herself, I had it on a really, really low cost basis. And I was overwhelmed by the support and was able to do that work this year. And I was able to do it because of the virtual nature of the classes and being able to have, 20 mamas in a class. That was something that it may have been difficult, beforehand, but here I am. And out of the pandemic, the 100 Black Mamas Project has grown, and it now is going to be an ongoing project that will never stop being virtual. Because if I'm looking at the issue of accessibility, well, the internet eliminates that. Anyone can access the class from anywhere in the world. And so I'm actually currently fundraising for the 2021 100 Black Mamas, where next year I'll be teaching 100 mamas every month from March through June. So it's going to be a lot, but if the pandemic hadn't happened, I don't know if 100 Black Mamas would be in existence. And I'll throw in the plug that folks can support 100 Black Mamas through the Spread Karma platform. You can search spreadkarma.org and go to 100 Black Mamas and donate so that you can sponsor a mama. The 400 mamas that I teach next year, none of them are going to have to pay. And that is going to be made possible through the donations from folks who just care, from other mamas who know that they needed birth education and never had the chance to get it. And so a lot have reached out to me and been like, hey, if for $40 I can ensure that the next mama feels prepared, then I'll donate my $40. So that's how the pandemic has affected me.
It's kind of amazing how the pandemic has sort of bubbled people in, but also allowed them to expand like outside of where they usually would have reach. Because like working with people all over the world is possible because of the digital format. And a lot of times we didn't think about that. Before the pandemic, we just thought about our immediate area, like what can we do and what can we like physically reach. And now people are sort of thinking outside of their immediate area and going beyond that, to think about how can we make change in places that we aren't like personally there for, which I think is very powerful and sort of a hidden gem of this whole situation it's allowed people to sort of expand their minds a little bit more, which is something I didn't really expect. I mean, most people didn't expect it would go on this long. We assumed to be. I remember when I left school, it was like, oh, I'm just going to be gone for spring break. But now it's August. But
Yeah,
it's definitely something that's developed in such a way I don't think anybody would have expected.
for
Um,
sure.
I have an additional question about specifically your postpartum care and what that sort of process looks like, because you're not just there before and during the birth, you're there afterwards. What sort of support do you provide in that sort of area?
Postpartum is so major. Everyone thinks of postpartum depression as, you know, the one condition that is associated with postpartum, and postpartum depression is very real, and it's something that is not to be taken lightly. It's something that it behooves us all to understand, and I do mean all, not just mamas. A lot of times others around us notice the signs before we even realize ourselves, but it's not everything. There's a lot that needs to be considered with postpartum. I actually, you hit on one of my hot topics. I actually have a signature postpartum planning guide that I not only use with my own clients, but I'm grateful to know that I got it into the hands of other doulas across the country so that they can also use it to work with their mamas. It's important you look ahead to postpartum. Your life is different, even if this is not your first baby. Even if you grew up taking care of babies, your life is going to be different. Like, there's a whole nother person there. And yeah, they're not going to be demanding that you cook them a steak dinner, but they're going to come with their own set of needs and wants. And you are going to have to attend to those. You're going to have to tend to yourself. You're going to have to tend to the relationships in your life that existed before you had the baby. So there's a lot to think about. I cringe when people say things like, you know, you need to do self-care when you're in your postpartum. Things like taking a shower. Taking a shower is not self-care. So it's important for me to work with mamas to look ahead, to talk about their expectations for postpartum, to talk about some things that I know they'll face in the postpartum. You know, we're dealing with things like breastfeeding, you know, establishing the breastfeeding relationship, going through the various, you know, phases of breastfeeding, struggles, if there are any struggles. But there are things to look at also, like the healing of your body, right? You just had a whole human pass through one way or another. Either they came out of your belly or they came through your vagina. Either way, some physical healing is going to need to go on, you know? So we talk through all of that to prepare them for that. In the postpartum planning guide, because I know how much your mental health has to be prioritized in the postpartum as well. It doesn't matter about, you know, whether or not you're a good mom, bad mom. It has nothing to do with that. You can love your child and, you know, you can't even see past them because you love them so much, but you are still susceptible to your mental health going on a decline in postpartum. It's just a fact of life. There's hormones at play, there's the adjustment at play, so much. So, you know, we look ahead and we plan. I have them write out, who's your tribe? Who are your people? Like, think of people in your life, you know, who have small kids. Especially if their kid is like 5 and under, they still kind of know what that's like. They still remember those days that you're going to be in. So I have them write out like a list of people, and yeah, they have the people in their phone already, but I have them put it on a piece of paper so they can see, like, I'm not alone in this. I have a tribe, right? These are the people who are going to provide my immediate support. They're going to physically be there. And then these are people who I can call, you know, if I need some info, some advice, just to someone to hear me out. And then I go through, you know, goals. Like everyone on social media talks about hashtag goals. Well, these are our postpartum goals, and it has nothing to do with how quickly you fit into a bikini and are on Instagram taking pictures after you have your baby. Snapback culture is so toxic. It has everything to do with the way you're adjusting, the way you're feeling, you know, how you're able to get yourself out of bed and understand, while things may not be the same as they ever were quite again, but I need to establish what my new normal is. You know, it's about not, remember that village that it takes to keep a mom held up. So we're not going to let you stay in your bed forever and ever and ever because something may be difficult or hard or you don't want to face it. We're going to find ways that we can help you work to a point of not returning to what was, not putting all this pressure and stress on yourself to get back to normal, but working towards what your new normal is, what works for you and your family, you know? And then when I do postpartum visits, a lot of it is on the emotional side, you know, it's the emotional support. I spend a lot of time holding a baby, because sometimes you just don't realize all the things that you've been needing to do and wanting to do until someone comes and is willing to hold a baby so you can actually do it. I spend a lot of time just listening to mamas and postpartum visits. We just talk and I listen. My first postpartum visit after the birth, I call it a birth sealing session, where we talk about your birth story. Doesn't matter that I was there. I saw it, but I saw from my viewpoint. I want to hear it from you, because speaking on it, speaking on what happened, the good and the bad of it, is healing. It's healing for them. It's healing for me. I get healed every time I hear of another woman who's able to speak on her birth. And maybe everything didn't go the way she wanted it to go, but the more that you can begin to speak on it and name what it is that you liked and you didn't like, the more you're taking your power back, even in a situation where you maybe felt powerless. So I do that. I do some practical help with different things. I offer breastfeeding assistance. So maybe there's some issues and I help work through those, some issues of position or whatever. Sometimes I'm looking, is this normal? I'm looking at a little rash on the baby's back, you know, helping mama with her physical care. I love herbs. So sometimes I'm, you know, making a healing herbal bath for mama. You name it. I've sat there before and braided someone's hair. You know, it's just very practical, tending to mama and what she needs, whatever that is. I may visit her one day and she's great, you know, she's feeling great, moving around, doing other things. And I may come on another day and it's a tough day and breastfeeding has been challenging that day, or maybe the other children have been challenging on that day. And maybe all I do for the whole 2 hours that I'm there is sit there and listen while you talk and you cry. But that's postpartum care.
Wow, I feel like that's really powerful. It's because it's something that people
Mm-hmm.
don't think about. If you go about the birth process in the normal way, you go to the hospital, you get the baby, and then you stay for a few days and you go home. And then it's kind of just on you and maybe your family members to handle that. So postpartum care is something that I believe would be pretty unique to having an experience with services like yours, because a lot of the time people just assume you're able to handle it. You have the baby, you've done the hard part, and that's maybe not what the hard part is.
That's right.
Okay, so I have another question. You're someone you're an empath and you take care of a lot of other people, not only for your profession, but just as what you do in general life. What do you do for self-care for yourself? How do you manage your own stress and your own sort of stressors that come with your life?
Yeah, so you have to be very aware of yourself in doing this kind of work. You know, like I said, there's a whole spiritual side to it. So being an empath, I understand the necessity of not only like protecting myself and my energy when I go into a space, because it's not my space. I can't control it, you know? So I have to be aware and protect it in the ways I see fit, from any energy, any situations that I may encounter. And then on the flip side of the birth, I have like these rituals that I do for myself, because I have to then cleanse myself from anything that I may have absorbed, you know, with my empathic nature. And there's a lot, and I do absorb a lot. You know, even throughout pregnancy or in my classes, you know, I'm discussing people's fears and that energy. It's like I told you earlier when we were talking about fear, and I said we have to seal it. We can't just leave that there, you know. It's very, very powerful. You have to continuously be doing these internal surveys of yourself and being aware, because there are times like when I'll be like, man, ugh, like I just don't feel good, and then I do an inventory with myself, and I'm like, nothing actually happened to me directly. Like maybe it was someone called me and they had a dramatic situation or a bad situation, and I took that on. I took it into my body and into my being, and so I'm feeling as if something bad happened to me, and it really didn't. And that happens with births. And I serve mamas who are from every walk of life. I've served mamas who are trauma and abuse survivors. And, I have just encountered lots of different situations. So part of what I do is making sure that meditation and prayer are a part of my daily routine. And I'm able to go through, I listen to this awesome meditation mixtape. It's called a meditation mixtape. And it's actually really cool. It was created for folks who, meditation is your thing. Spa music, maybe not so much. So it's meditation, but it's got like some really like nice, dope music. And one of the things that I listen to on it is called a protective prayer. I listen to the 4-part breathing and the protective prayer like every day before I encounter any of my clients, any of my students. And one of the things she says in there is that whatever I come across, whatever it looks like, sounds like, feels like, may it only be for my good. And so that's a part of it. And then another part of self-care is learning when to turn off, because when someone hires me, I make myself fully accessible to them. Any questions, concerns they have, I'm fully there. I'm the listening ear, I'm the sounding board, I'm whatever you need me to be. I just want you to feel supported. But I have to also get to a point where I learned that I deserve myself. And my family deserves me. I'm a mom myself. I have 2 small children. I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. Like, they need mama still. And I had to put these spiritual practices into play for myself so that I could continue to show up in the ways that they need me to, and in the way I need to show up for myself. Setting my boundaries, things like having working hours. When I'm on call for a birth, that's different. But outside of that, like, I have to set boundaries. I have to have certain days where I schedule nothing, just so that I can declutter my head and do what I need to do. So those are the ways that I take care of myself. If this were in a dream world, I'd also say I go and get a full body massage after every birth, because my body feels like a wire coat hanger that's been like bent into some other shape. But I don't do that. Maybe next interview I will have added that into my practice.
Well, thank you so much for, I'm out of questions, and but I feel like you've given such like well-rounded responses to everything. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I feel like people watching will have a lot to learn from you, and maybe seek out your services since you're digital now. They may be like, hey,
yeah.
you sound great, you sound amazing. Because I know I certainly would. If I were about to have a baby, you'd be the first person I call. But
you better. Well, what I will say is I see value in non-pregnant people, and even people who are not female, are not women. I see the value in birth education for them. Marie Mongan, the founder of Hypnobirthing, she's famous for her quote, "When you change the way you view birth, the way you birth will change." And birth is so transformative for all of us, because then that means there's another person on this earth to share it with us, and we all could benefit from a healthier view of birth. So I say that to say that I welcome non-pregnant people into my class, and I actually love it. And so I have always, since I began this work, had a passion for young women and teens especially. So any college students, pregnant or not, who want to take my class, I do something really, really special for students and teens. All you have to do is reach out to me and let me know that you want to take the class, and you can take my Essentials for Birth Prep session. It's a 3-hour session for $20, because it's not about the money. I feel like it's not about that. It's about affecting change in this world, one person at a time. Maybe you're not, a pregnant Black mama, but you'll encounter one day somewhere, and the way you treat her, the way you view her will have an effect on her self-esteem, on her confidence, on her mental health. And so it definitely benefits us all to be good citizens here on this earth. So that's something that I definitely offer. And I love working with non-pregnant folks, because those connections I like to see happen a little earlier.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's really good to know. I didn't even know that was a service offered. I feel like it's definitely important for people to have perspective in anything, even if it isn't something that even you may never personally experience. Just understanding how to have empathy for other people going through something that you may not personally go through is very important. Just in learning how to interact with other people.
And
I feel like
and learning
really
about these amazing bodies that we have. Like I've known people who have 3 children, and they can't give me 3 sentences about what the mucus plug is or does, or why they have one. So things like that. Just dropping knowledge. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here for this interview and talking to me. Stacey, should we pause the recording? I don't know exactly how to finish it all.
I will stop right now.